Hello, my name is Robbie Ward. I'm the government and politics reporter at the Northeast Mississippi Daily Journal in Tupelo, Mississippi. And in my experiences reporting, I've written extensively about issues with the North Lee County Rural Water Association and issues that the association has had related to financial issues such as mismanagement, noncompliance with federal regulations of a USDA rural development loan, and unaccounted for money. And as a part of my reporting, I received assistance from an employee at the Water Association, Sonny Noble, and he's also the whistleblower who spoke out in 2011 related to employees at the Water Association working on private property, and the supervisor at the time not providing appropriate documentation of the water chemical makeups that led to resignation of the entire board and a federal indictment and conviction related to that. And so joining me now is Dr. David Reiss. He's a psychiatrist in San Diego, California, and today he's going to speak about traumatic childhood experiences that could have an impact on an individual's adult life. And Dr. Reiss, I certainly appreciate you joining me today.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Well, if you don't mind, I know that you have extensively evaluated 12 to 15,000 people in your 31 years as a practicing psychiatrist, of which up to 60% have had traumatic childhood experiences. And well, first off, tell me about how some of traumatic childhood experiences have impacted some of the people that you've evaluated as they've reached their adult lives.
Certainly, it really runs a very wide gamut, some of which we understand, and frankly, some of which we don't understand. And of course, those people who have had trauma who are minimally affected wouldn't get to my office, so I wouldn't see them. But the people that I have seen, it runs anywhere from impacting their whole sense of self, their whole sense of identity, their relationships with people and ability to function, to more subtle influences on interpersonal relationships, or even their choices of an occupation or their attitude or philosophy towards life. And you can have people who have had very similar backgrounds who have very different levels of reaction, both on a practical basis and on a technical, pathological, or diagnostic basis.
Sure, and that's one thing I was very interested in. The particular person I'm speaking with you about, his name is Sonny Noble, and he previously worked at the Water Association. And in 2011, he went public to the Daily Journal about broken laws and inappropriate activity at the Water Association. And he did this at the risk of losing his job. And in fact, he thought he would lose his. He thought he would be fired. And then in February of this year, he reached out to me about what he considered corruption and financial improprieties and even broken laws. And in my research, I learned that he had some extremely traumatic events in his childhood. And well, I have here the Daily Journal's bound volume from November of 1989, and you'll see the headline from November 16th is 3 killed in crosstown shooting, man charged. And what actually occurred? A woman, Sonny Noble's mother, Pamela Pearson, she had an estranged ex-boyfriend who apparently could not handle the end of the relationship, and as she drove home from work with 2 people in her car that she would plan to return home, that they were stopped at a train crossing, and the estranged ex-boyfriend who followed her left his car, went up to her car, and shot each of them in the car at point blank range and murdering each of them. And so Sonny's mother was murdered when he was age 7, and prior to that, his mother, he, and his 2 older siblings lived in her car for a period of time, and 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 I would imagine that this is something that you would consider some of the more extreme childhood experiences.
Certainly, certainly.
And so I know with this impacting Sonny when he was age 7, in my recent interviews with him, I've asked him if he's believes this has had an impact on his life, and he said that he tries not to think about it, and so even if this is something that he does not consciously think about, does an event like this have a significant role in shaping who he is?
Yes, of course, I'd like to preface it by saying I've never met Mr. Noble, so I can't speak specifically to him. I haven't evaluated him, but I can certainly speak in general. An event like that is highly traumatic. How a child reacts would depend upon the child's age, upon their previous experiences, as well as upon what type of support or lack of support they receive afterwards. Some of it we believe also is due to just inborn traits that some people are more resilient than others. Whether or not a person consciously notices a connection, an event like that is likely to have an effect. At very least, to talk in a sense the most general terms, beyond the sense of loss and grief, sadness, anger, it creates a sense of chaos and a sense of the world being unpredictable. And then generally children, whether they're extremely young, even as young as infancy, but surely through adolescence or even adult life, will try to bring some sense of control and order into their life. At times that's unsuccessful, and they may fall into depression or substance abuse or various other forms of pathology. Or they may find more adaptive ways to bring order into their life, sometimes through their work, sometimes through volunteer work or helping others, but to try to create some sense of order and control in their life. So this is a situation where, again, I don't know the man, but it might well be that this set a pattern of his looking for control and fairness and safety in life.
Right, and so you'd mentioned just a moment ago that each person being different, that the same event can create different impacts for them, and for Sonny, well, he's someone who has this strong sense of conviction to I guess, in his mind, correct something, an injustice of sorts. And although he has, one of his siblings has had other experiences that has led to criminal activity. Is it sometimes common for even siblings to have just very different paths in life who have traumatic experiences such as these?
Actually, it's very common because you also have the interaction between the siblings, which may cast each into somewhat of a different role within within the family, as well as the younger siblings, in a sense, seeing how the older ones react, sometimes imitating it, sometimes saying, I absolutely don't want to go in that direction. I'm going to do something totally differently. And that may be conscious or unconscious. But it's probably more typical than not that different members of the family in a situation like that will, in a sense, consciously or unconsciously act out different roles. Some may embrace justice and seeking justice. Some may feel that if we use the word evil, is so powerful, I'm going to join with it. So you can have very different reactions, very opposite reactions. Part of the work I do, which is through the California Workers' Compensation System, I've seen, I would say, 2,500 correctional employees. I don't deal with criminals, but with the employees. It's not uncommon at all for correctional employees to have a sibling who's on the other side of the bars. They had similar environments growing up, but went in very different directions. And sometimes there's a direct correspondence there where one saw where the other was going and then intentionally goes in another direction.
And and for Sonny to have this sense of, I guess, sense of having to speak out about a perceived injustice that he experiences. He did tell me that prior to going public with some of this information, that he tried to discuss it within his organization, but saw no action related to it. And for someone that has had experiences that create this sense of, I guess, morality or highly ethical behavior, is this something that is healthy? Is this something that allows for someone to have a productive professional life? I mean, because clearly he was not rewarded in the most professional way. I mean, he was fired from his job in April.
Yeah, it can really range throughout the spectrum. There are some people who basically seek justice and get into, whether it be voluntary or part of their work, seeking fairness and justice in very adaptive ways that really helps them out, and that's very helpful and healthy. There are some people who take it too far, where they sacrifice everything to the sense of justice and let other parts of their life falter. One things I tell people when I'm working with them is you have to choose your battles. If you fight every battle, you're going to be worn out and you're going to be ineffective. Or if you're just banging your head against the wall, you're just going to get a headache. But everybody has to make the judgment of where they draw the line. Now, I can't comment specifically on where he drew the line. Some people don't know where to draw the line and will go on futile seekings of justice, which really becomes dysfunctional. Others will be very adaptive and at times decide this is worth the potential sacrifice or the risk with good judgment, sometimes with not so good judgment. But it really runs the wide spectrum. Certainly with that kind of trauma, it's difficult for a person to learn where to draw the line, but some people do it very effectively. And then the specific moral decision of, which fight do I sacrifice what for, really isn't so much a psychiatric issue as a personal decision, as long as it's not in the extreme.
Sure. And people that I've discussed this situation with, and Sonny has mentioned this to me as well. Well, he saw in, um, things happening where he worked that he felt compelled to make public, and other people, they acknowledged that certainly this is they thought behaviors happening where he worked, or as described, certainly should be corrected in some sense, but they did not have the desire to, or they said they would not have the desire to act in his way to risk his employment. For someone who's had such a traumatic event or events in childhood, can that create some way that someone would have a very intense desire to seek out justice?
Yeah, there would be a desire to seek justice, to basically get rid of evil. The question is how far you go with it and where you draw the line. And there's a very gray area between what is bravery that we should really admire and when does it become foolhardy and self-sacrifice for no good reason. And I'm not commenting specifically on what he did or where he drew the line, but there are some people who just, well, let's put it this way. We all have to put up with a certain amount of corruption in our lives. We see things, we hear things, and basically if we fought every injustice, that's all we'd ever do. So we have to decide where we draw the line, how far we go, what sacrifices we want to make, and that involves both innate courage as a part of a personality, also weighing responsibility to self and family as opposed to the risks you take. And sometimes they're very hard decisions with no real right or wrong answer. But someone who has a background which so powerfully drives them to seek justice may have to be careful not to go overboard. I mean, we can even see that the figure of Batman is someone who was traumatized as a child. And this is, of course, fictional. And you could say, well, is it adaptive or is it maladaptive? How far did he go? Where do you draw the line? And actually, I think some of the movies try to address that question. Obviously, that's fictional and extreme. But I've seen cases that really weren't that different. Maybe they weren't driving around in a Batmobile, but some people who couldn't help but fight every injustice to the point that people didn't like them, people were scared of them, and they became ineffective. To the other side, people who back off on everything because they're too scared, and those who make reasonable judgments of what do I sacrifice, which battles do I take on. And the more that you can bring logic and balance to the decision, the more you can basically modulate the inner drive for justice, which in a situation like this you would have to assume would be extremely powerful.
Sure. And you just touched on this, but for someone who has lost his job for whistleblowing, there could be, I guess, a challenge to seek additional employment, because maybe some employers would have concerns that an employee who has been a whistleblower previously could be I guess, an out of control employee. But is that always the case? Or could someone like this be a desirable employee at an organization?
It certainly someone like this can be very desirable in the right place, where that's part of their function is to seek out problems and to address them in a assertive, appropriate way. Now, that's not to say that all employers are going to respect that. Surely some people will be very unfairly blacklisted, whereas some people may be actually honored for it, or go on to very good things. One of the things that I deal with patients that I'm working with is, unless someone is really being inappropriate, it's not my role to tell them what to do. But what is my role as a therapist is to say, have you considered all the ramifications? Have you considered not just the fantasy that everything will go great and you'll be honored, but the reality that there may be some unfair blowback also, and that's something you and potentially your family will have to face. The decision is yours and not mine. I just want to make sure that the person is considering those options and those possibilities, good and bad, in a fairly reasonable way.
And with someone in this having been a whistleblower, and twice, that's led to very significant, and who's also experienced this traumatic things from childhood, how do you advise people that you've assisted in your career? How do you advise them to proceed? Is this something, even the whistleblower element, is this something that remains with someone, and if it does, what advice do you have?
Yeah, as I say, I unless someone's doing something bizarre, I don't say don't do this or yes, do this. But I'll definitely encourage people to not only think it through by themselves, but also to get advice. Get advice from people they trust, from family. At times, get legal advice as to what really are the risks that you're taking. What may happen that's good, what may happen that's bad. Are you prepared for that? Sometimes to get advice spiritually, or from people they trust who can give them a balanced view. And that doesn't mean necessarily that they have to follow any one person's advice, but to get different opinions from people who have legal perspectives, ethical perspectives, practical perspectives, and then really consider it before making a decision, not to act impulsively.
Well, Dr. Reiss, I've incredibly appreciated your willingness to take a few moments of your day to discuss this with me. And for people out there who have an interest in developments in this story and other stories related to the North Lee Water Association and Sonny Noble, certainly there's a pending lawsuit related to wrongful termination. Continue to read about it in the Daily Journal and djournal.com. And again, I certainly appreciate you being here today, Dr. Reiss.
Thank you very much. My pleasure. Hope that I was helpful.
Okay, great. And again, my name is Robbie Ward. I'm the government and politics reporter for the Daily Journal, and thanks for watching.